Welcome back everybody to the second part of Synology's Virtual Solution Days. In this second presentation, I'm going to take you through Synology's virtualization solutions and Synology virtual storage solutions. First, we're going to see what Synology can do for your customers if they want to build their own virtual storage environment through iSCSI LAN. We're going to see what Synology can do for your customers if they want to build their own virtualization server through Virtual Machine Manager and Virtual Machine Manager Pro. And we're going to see which units are the best fit to building this kind of infrastructure for your customers. But first, we're going to take one step back and take a look at what is virtualization. And I know many of you already know what virtualization is, so it will be just a small recap. If we look at the traditional architecture, you have your server or your computer running a single operating system with the applications on it. If we look at the virtualization architecture, your PC or your server will be able to run multiple operating systems and running multiple applications on this, allowing you to use the full resources of your hardware. So what a virtualization server does is creating a new piece of software, the hypervisor, which allow you to run your different virtual machines. But besides running the virtual machines, you also need a place to store the data created by those virtual machines. And by doing this, the virtualization server will be connected to a network, which will be connected to a virtualization server. And through a iSCSI protocol, you can create an iSCSI LAN, like a virtual drive, if you wish, and store the data from the virtual machines on the storage server, creating your own virtual storage environment. And talking about storage, you might think about Synology, because we already have over 100,000 customers running a Synology NAS as a storage server, servicing over 250,000 of these iSCSI LANs on these storage servers. And one of these customers that is already working with this kind of infrastructure is LMIS. Let's make IT smarter. And LMIS is an experienced IT company based in Germany, and what they do is they build customized IT solutions for their customers. And they do this by running over 70 virtual machines in a testing environment and in a production site. And the challenge that LMIS was facing is that they were in need of a centralized storage solution for these plus 70 virtual machines. They still needed to have outstanding performance and storage efficiency, and this all needed to come a cost-effective solution. So this is what they came up with together with Synology. On the ASXC server, they have their plus 70 virtual machines running, connected through a switch through the FS 2017, an all-flash storage array Synology NAS with an already integrated 10 Gbit network card, allowing them to benefit from the highest bandwidth. Besides this, they placed a second machine next to it, a second FS 2017, and connected it through a heartbeat cable, allowing them to create a Synology high availability cluster. This means that one unit will be the active server and the other unit will be the passive server. If anything would happen to the active server, the passive server automatically takes over and will allow you to not suffer from any downtime and continue your work process. So by building this infrastructure, LMIS benefited from the following cases. Since the installation of the infrastructure, they didn't suffer from any downtime and were perfectly operational 24/7, and the installation was in 2017. Also, because they could use the intuitive software, the DSM, the Station Manager, it was easy to manage the virtualization cluster and easy to set it up and integrate it. Also, because already with the integrated 10 Gbit network card for highest bandwidth and all flash array for the highest performance, it allowed them to have the data intensive requirements they needed. Besides this, you can imagine that a company like LMIS can easily grow data over time. So also it's easy to expand your data by easily add an expansion unit to your FS 2017. And this allowed the Flash Station 2017 to be the ideal storage solution for their critical loads on their VMs. So we mentioned integration. So you might think, if my customers already have an existing infrastructure, will it be difficult to add a Synology NAS in their already existing environment? And the answer is no, because we're compatible with the most used software out there. VMware vSphere, Windows Hyper-V, Citrix, and OpenStack. So even if you already your customers already have an existing infrastructure, it's easy to add a Synology NAS as a virtual storage solution. We also mentioned cost effectiveness. And with a full suite of data protection features integrated in the hardware, more about this later, 5-year warranty, and no worries about maintenance contracts or license fees, it's a very cost-effective solution. Also performance. We've seen that it can be necessary for customers to have the highest performance for their virtual storage environment. If we look at performance, we fully support 10, 25 or 40 gigabit connections for maximum network bandwidth. Also using the full flash station array with the highest IOPS and lowest latency, or hybrid storage if you want to leverage SSD cache, providing an optimal balance between costs, storage and performance. Also scalability, because we've seen that customers the data need of customers can grow over time. It's easy to expand the data of the already installed units or to expand the memory. And with expanding, the Synology NAS can handle up to 1.5 petabytes of raw storage capacity. Then you might be wondering, if my customers want to integrate this in their existing infrastructure, will this be difficult to install and to manage? So we've seen already that it's compatible with the most used software, but also installation is intuitive and easy. Like you know from our DSM, Distribution Manager, we also have an iSCSI Manager. And the iSCSI Manager is an intuitive management tool, allowing your customers to easily set up their iSCSI LANs and their virtual storage network. Benefiting from thin provisioning, VMware Vi, and Microsoft ODX. So to sum up, Synology can allow your customers to use their own enterprise storage in their iSCSI environment with intuitive management tools and instant disaster recoveries. As mentioned, more about this later. But besides building this virtual storage environment, what's also important is to actually make sure that it's safe and protected. So more about this now, and to do this I want to introduce it by a customer story. And the customer in this case is UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, Cultural Organization, known for protecting our world's famous landmarks, but also seeking to build peace through international cooperations in education, science, culture. UNESCO was challenged with the following challenge. With more than 70 offices around the globe, Europe, Africa, United States, South America, Asia, they needed a standardized IT solution that could be built in their main office in France, Paris, to be sent out and spread throughout the world. And it needed to be unified so they could all work at the same way. So the solution they came up with together with Synology is to create a box system. So in this box system there was included 2 Windows servers configured as their Hyper-V. Underneath this in the box they have a Synology RS3617XS Plus, which the iSCSI LANs were created to, where the virtual machines could store their data. Underneath this one they had a smaller Synology NAS unit, a DS418, where through Hyper Backup the LANs were backed up on the secondary NAS. So they were always sure that the data was stayed safe. And through this box system they could easily send it out through different subsidiaries all over the world, even if they were high demanding subsidiaries like in Africa where high temperatures or a lot of sand, or when the network connections were not as good as we used to here in Europe. So the benefits for UNESCO were they were better to maintain the data that's created in a more unified way, and could make sure they could back up all the data very easily. And it was a reliable, secure solution for all their subsidiaries around the world. So in the story of UNESCO, we see another factor coming up, and it's data protection. So they protected the data through Hyper Backup from the RS3617XS Plus to a DS418. And also internally in their office, they were using the Active Backup for Business solution mentioned already in previous presentation. So we mentioned protection through hardware Synology's high availability and protection through software, active backup for business, but we can provide more for a total protection plan. So in the following schema, we see the active backup for business, as mentioned already in the previous presentation. And on the left, to be precise here, we can also see the Synology high availability solution, where you place two NAS of exactly the same type, one serving as active and one serving as passive. Also mentioned just now in the case of UNESCO, we see the hyper backup solution. And the hyper backup solution allows you to create a backup of your storage server to a secondary storage server, protecting your data. And what we can also see here in the schema is the snapshot and replication. And this one we did not mention yet. So let's talk a bit more about the snapshot and replication. Snapshot and replication, the name by itself already says it. It takes a snapshot, a photo if you will, and replicates it to a different location. So the different location can be another volume on the same NAS, or it can be to a remote NAS, allowing you to safeguard the system, so the photos as they're taken from this moment, and they can make multiple snapshots over time, allowing you to have a very safe and full security protocol. So when we look at snapshot replication, key features, it can make snapshots of your shared folders and of your LUNs. It has a 5-minute RPO, 15 minutes for LUN, and a 1-minute RTO. It has a minimal impact on the performance because the snapshots are very light, and it allows you to create a flexible replication and archiving plan. So we've seen many different software applications to protect your data. So let's have them again in an overview. So first, if we look at the snapshot replication, when can you advise your customers to use the snapshot and replication plan? This is when they want to make sure their shared folders or their LUNs are secured, and that they have a second location to replicate those snapshots to. So this can be, for example, in a virtual cluster. More about this later. We have seen the active backup for business. This is if you want to make sure you back up your virtual machine entirely as it is, or your virtual server as it is. So active backup for business allows you to create a backup of a virtual machine individually and restore it when needed. Hyper backup also allows you to create a shared folder, a backup of a shared folder or of a LUN. But to use the hyper backup, you need to make sure you have a second Synology NAS available as backup target. And Synology high availability allows you to secure your entire infrastructure on hardware level. So that means if anything would happen to your hardware device, the passive server automatically takes over, so you will not suffer from any downtime. So it's for mission critical data deployments. So when talking about high availability and keeping your data safe, and as we are talking about the topic of virtual storage environments through iSCSI, Synology also has introduced a new unit that will be perfect fit for your customers that need to have the highest safety and highest performance for their iSCSI LUN infrastructure. And this is the unified controller UC3200. The UC3200 comes with a dual controller. So that means there are two controllers. If one of two controllers that are active, so it's an active infrastructure. So if one of the controllers would go down, the other controller automatically takes over all the processes, so you will never suffer from any downtime or switchover times. It has an iSCSI cache protection, so even if there's on one of the controllers that goes down, there's a cache. This is also protected and taken over by the second controller. Well, as mentioned, it's active. It also has a SATA DOM, which means that the operating system itself, the DSM in this case, is stored on the SATA DOM separately from the controllers. So when it needs to be updated, you can safely update your operating system without any downtime. Also, it supports the NTB, so it also makes sure that the data that is processed at the moment when one of the controllers would go down automatically flows over to the second controller, and this allows you to have a focused service on your iSCSI LUN infrastructure. So the UC3200, an active IP SAN, comes with full integrated options for your iSCSI services, and therefore fully optimized for your virtual storage environment. And this allows you to have your own disaster-proof unit for mission-critical data. The unit comes with two Intel Xeon D1521 processors. Standard, it has 8 GB of memory, but it can easily be expanded. And as mentioned, it has a cytodome where the operating system is stored on and can be updated without suffering from any downtime. So when looking at a virtual storage environment, we've seen different units coming by, from FlashStation to the UC3200, how to advise your customers on the best choice for their unit in their environment. So when we're looking for storage for virtualization, there are a few things that you need to keep in mind. If your customers are thinking about maximum performance, you will always end up in the FlashStation range, because these will give you the highest IOPS and the lowest latency for maximum performance. If they need balanced performance and maximum storage capacity, you can think of an SA series or an RS series. And if you need balanced performance, maximum storage capacity, and ultimate safety of your hardware, you will end up with the UC3200. But important for you, if you have certain projects running at the moment where these kind of units could be a perfect fit and you don't know which one to choose or how to advise your customers on the right unit, don't hesitate to contact us directly through the email address or in the chat later, and we will be happy to help you to select you with the right units. So we've now seen how you can help your customers build the perfect virtual storage solution by using Synology NAS. What if your customers want to build a virtual server themselves by using a Synology NAS? Also, this is possible by using the Virtual Machine Manager. The Virtual Machine Manager can turn your NAS into a hyper-converged all-in-one server, supporting the most used operating systems out there, the Windows servers, also the Linux families from Ubuntu, Red Hat, to of course our own Synology DSM, creating a virtual DSM. One of our customers that already worked in this way with using a Synology as their virtual server is their Spitzer. It's also a German company, and it's a company that wants to bring business-grade solutions to normal end users, private customers. That means they want to give professional mail servers, a media server, a file server, all these kind of solutions that businesses are used to work with and are very convenient. They also want to bring it to the private user. But to do this, they also need to make sure they can maximize use of the storage utilization. Because you can imagine if you have many private users, the storage grows very rapidly. So the solution by itself needs to be versatile and expandable. And it needs to be cost effective, because they don't want to rate them with a business grade price for the private users. So what they came up with together with Synology is building a cluster. And in the cluster they have 4 RS3617XS+. 2 of them servicing as a storage node, together with SSD cache for maximum performance, and 2 of them servicing as the computing nodes, with 64 GB of RAM, also to make sure they can give the performance to the customers that they need. And these nodes together were running their Active Directory server, their calendar contact server, mail server, and even surveillance for their private end users. And everything running perfectly. So you might be wondering, okay, but this is difficult to create these virtual machines or in this virtual environment. Not at all. And to show you, I'm gonna take you through a demo on how to create your own virtual machine on the Virtual Machine Manager, in this case a virtual DSM. So here we are in the DSM in the Virtual Machine Manager, and we can simply go to the Create button. And in the create button, we can click on Microsoft, Linux, or virtual DSM. In this case, virtual DSM. We select the storage, so we're already on our own NAS. So we select our solution days NAS for this, and we can give our virtual machine a name. In this case, VDSM. We also need to allocate virtual CPU to it and virtual memory to it. In this case, we give it 2 virtual CPUs and 2 virtual memories. And we can continue. We need to also allocate how much storage capacity this virtual machine can use on our server. So we go for 50. And we can continue. Network settings are already correct, because you can also select which network port you want, and we can select if we all automatically want it to boot up the virtual machine. And we need to assign permissions. So in this case, we go for solution days permissions. So we have a summary of the virtual machine we have created. So we see the virtual CPUs, the virtual memory, and the name of the virtual machine. And then we can easily connect to it. We can boot it up. And as you can see, here is our own virtual machine that we have just created. It's as easy as this. So besides creating the virtual machine, we also talked about creating protection plans. So you also might be wondering if it's difficult to create a protection plan for your virtual environment. So let's have a look at how to create your own virtual protection plan through Snapshot and Replication. So in the Virtual Machine Manager, you can go through the Protection tab. In the Protection tab, you can create a new protection plan. So it can be locally, or it can be on a different server. This is only for the VMM Pro. More about this later. So for now, we go for the local snapshot. So we need to select which virtual DSM we want to backup, which virtual machine, and we need to create a schedule policy. So let's create a new policy to have a look of which freedom we have in this. So we can select the days, we can select the frequency, every 5 minutes to every 12 hours. So in this case, we go for the every 5 minutes. And we can have the in between which times the snapshot needs to be taken, starting time, ending time of the day. Then we go to the retention policy. So how long are we going to store the snapshots? So here we see there's a predefined retention protocol, but you can adapt it as you wish. So you can keep one every day, one every week, one every month, one every year, whatever fits your needs. Then you will have your summary. You can apply, and your protection plan is created. It works as easy as that. So then you might be wondering, how can I advise my customers on which Synology NAS unit to choose to create their virtual server? This will fully depend on the needs of your customers. So first of all, you need to make sure if your customer has the space to place a rack unit or not, or that he needs to have a disk station, a desk station, so a unit that's standing on his desk. Then you also need to know the needs of your customer. How many virtual machines do they need to run, and how heavy are the virtual machines that they're running? And here are some examples. So from a DS3018XS that can be put on your desk and that can run up to 4 virtual machines, to a RS1619XS Plus that needs to be put in a rack station, which is a 4-bay unit. So if you need high performance but low storage capacity, a perfect unit to go for. Or the RS3617XS Plus that can handle up to 12 virtual machines and also has high storage needs. So you can already see that we have, for every need, we have a fitting model. If you have any trouble choosing the right model for your customers, again, don't hesitate to contact us through mail, through the chat, and we will be happy to help you to select the right units for your customers. We already mentioned it, we have the Virtual Machine Manager, but if you are in need of more advanced features, we also have the Virtual Machine Manager Pro. And the Virtual Machine Manager Pro allows you to have a simplified management of multiple servers in your cluster, and it also provides advanced features for your infrastructure. Also, it will give you a guaranteed profitability. So let's go through the steps one by one. And first, the simplified management. Because you can imagine if your customers want to build their own virtual environment, they don't want to manage all the different servers separately. With VMM Pro, you have the possibility to create a cluster, and the cluster can be managed through the same virtual machine manager as you created the virtual machine as we just saw in the demo. So you will have a central management that can easily delegate your privileges, rapid deployment, and a web API support. So for the advanced features, I already mentioned it. It's possible with the VMM Pro to build your own cluster. So if you have multiple servers that are supporting virtual machines for you or for your customers, you can imagine that they also want to make sure that these different servers can be turned into a cluster. With the VMM Pro, you can. And you can add up to 7 NAS to your cluster. And this will also allow you to benefit from some extra additional features, such as dynamic resource management. You can create a remote protection plan, and you can have your own disaster recovery setup. So let's have a look at the dynamic resource management with the live migration and the storage migration. So for an active case, customers are working with their servers and have different virtual machines online set up already months or maybe a couple of years ago. And throughout the time, you can imagine that maybe some of the resources need to be allocated differently because one of the virtual machines is not having the capacity anymore to run on the same server. So you want to have the freedom to move this virtual machine from one server to another. Because of the cluster-based infrastructure, through live migration, you can easily move your virtual machine from one server to the other one without suffering from any downtime. That's why it's called a live migration. So this is for the virtual machine, but you can also imagine that in the same scenario, when you build up your cluster and you allocate it where your virtual machines need to store their data, that at one point one of the servers maybe is running full and you want to allocate the virtual disk to a different server. For this, you have the storage migration. And the storage migration allows you to change the virtual disk to a different server. So in this case, when the first server we've seen here only servicing one virtual disk, where the second server is servicing all the virtual disk from the virtual machine and is running full, with storage migration, we can just easily change the virtual disk to a different server. Another benefit from Virtual Machine Manager Pro and the clustered architecture is the remote protection plan. The remote protection plan allows you to safeguard your clustered infrastructure, same as you would want to do for your virtual storage environment. So how does this work? We already seen the snapshot and replication, and this works in exactly the same way. You can take a snapshot of your virtual disks and store them on a different server in your cluster and keep them safe. If anything would happen to the first server, you can easily restore those virtual disks, boot up the virtual machines, and continue working. Also, disaster recovery is very important because you can imagine if one of the servers would have physical damage or it would burn down, for example, you still need to be able to continue working if it's mission critical data. So for this we have the high availability as mentioned before, but now in the cluster, and the failover. So first, the high availability. The high availability allows you, if one of the servers in the cluster will go down, 1 or 2 or 3 of the other servers in the cluster will automatically take over those virtual machines. So we see here, one of the servers goes down and the other servers will automatically take over the virtual machines running, and this will allow you to not suffer from any downtime whatsoever. And it's a fully automated system. So this is how you can secure against disaster the virtual machines themselves, but you also want to make sure you can safeguard your the data stored by the virtual machines. This can be done by using the failover. In the same scenario, we created the snapshot and replication remote replication plan. So that means that the data, the virtual disk, are already stored on a different storage server. So if something would happen to one of the servers, you can easily manually go into your DSM, you can boot up those virtual disks, restart the virtual machines and continue working. And this will allow you to have a full disaster recovery plan. Disaster recovery plan for your computing nodes for effectively the virtual machines, and a disaster recovery plan for the storage node for the virtual disks. For the computing node, the virtual machines, you only have the booting time of a virtual machine, which is almost nothing. And for the recovery time of your virtual disk, you need to restore the virtual disk and boot up your virtual machine. So we already mentioned, so this is a high availability structure, but we also mentioned Synology high availability, where you effectively have two pieces of the same hardware connected to each other through a heartbeat cable. And the good news is that this you can also use in a virtual environment. So as we already seen in one of the customer stories before, they already set up a Synology high availability cluster for their virtual storage environment, but it can also be combined with Virtual Machine Manager. And by combining Synology high availability with the Virtual Machine Manager, you can benefit from both hardware and software features completely. The high availability allows you to have instant synchronization and automatically switching from the active server if something happens to the passive server. And it's compatible with the virtualization, so you can also run your virtual machines on your server, and it's also compatible with Virtual Machine Manager Pro functionalities. Then we mentioned guaranteed profitability. Of course, by the integration of hardware and software, so you get your full protection plan integrated in your hardware. You have your computing node together with your storage node 2-in-1 will also allow you to save costs for not investing in an additional storage or computing server. And we have a very competitive license fee. So if we look at the license fees for our Virtual Machine Manager Pro, the 3-node license for 1 year costs €170, and the 7-node license for 1 year costs €342. And this is very competitive pricing if you compare this to other players in the market. On top of this, if you or if your customers are insecure and they don't know if this solution is going to bring them what they need from their solution, they can even use a 30-day free trial. Go through all the features, set it up completely as they wish, and if it's up to their needs, continue working with the solution. So again, in short, what are the benefits of the Virtual Machine Manager Pro? You can benefit from the live migration, from the high availability, the storage migration, and the remote replication plan. You can set up the cluster, which allows you to use all these features. And also for the snapshot retention protocol, you can have up to 255 snapshots taken compared to 32 in the Virtual Machine Manager. Also here, how to choose the right Synology NAS to build your virtual environment. So it's important to know if you need a rack mount or a desk mount. It's important to know how many virtual machines you need to be running on your server, and you need to know what kind of protection plan you need, how mission critical the data is that you're working with. So all of these cases are very individual. So if you're working on any projects at the moment, or if you face any projects in the future where customers talk about virtual storage environments or building a virtual server, you think of Synology and don't hesitate to contact us, and we will help you to advise you in which server to go for. And talking about which servers to go for, we of course can already give you some heads up which are some great units to choose for building these kind of infrastructures. So we've already seen the UC3200. With its active-active dual controller interface, its quad-core Xeon processor, its 8 GB RAM, which can easily be expanded up to 64 GB, and 140,000 of random IOPS, it will allow you to have a very high performance iSCSI LUN storage server, which will guarantee the highest safety because of its active-active infrastructure. But also, if your customers need to benefit from high efficient storage capacities, if they also want to maybe use the server as a virtualization server themselves, high performance, you will end up in our flash station line, the FS3400. It's an 8-core Intel Xeon processor, allows you to profit from 35,000 IOPS. So if your customers need a high performance virtualization server, DFS is the way to go. If your customers need even more performance, extreme performance needs, or advanced storage for virtualization, you will end up with the bigger brother, the FS6400, with its 2-time 8-core Intel Xeon processor, offering you up to 240,000 IOPS. So to conclude, again, if you have any questions about which server to go for, in which kind of solutions, about compatibility or integration, don't hesitate to contact us. But to take one step back, if you want to know what Synology can provide for your customers in terms of storage for virtualization, we've seen some hardware and our software solutions for how easy it is to integrate them into existing infrastructures, or how easy it is to build from the ground up their own virtual storage environment. We've seen what Synology can do for your customers that have the need to build their own virtual server. This can be in a cluster environment with our Virtual Machine Manager Pro, and allowing them the highest safety through our high availability solutions. And also, if your customers want to make sure they can benefit from the highest performance from our all-flash station range, or the highest safety in terms of virtualization storage with the UC3200 for our hardware lineup.